State and federal judges are joining together in order to oppose and resist the Trump administration and its Department of Justice's attack on the judiciary and on law firms. There is no greater barrier to the excesses of democracy, as de Tocqueville put in the 1830s, than an independent bar, lawyers willing to do their job. And as part of our constitutional republic, we need an independent judiciary as well. And for judges to come together in numbers I've never seen before, 300 and 400, and file amicus, friends of the court briefs in the various cases in which law firms have been attacked is extraordinary. And it's not just a one-off situation. Every time we've got 4 separate law firms that are currently in litigation who have stood up against the Trump administration and are in front of federal judges in the DC District Court, Jenner and Block, Perkins Coie, Sussman Gottfried, Wilmer Hale, all before different judges. We just got our first order concerning one of those from Judge Beryl Howell that I'm going to talk about more. And separately, just to show you the judiciary is under attack, we just had our first, but unfortunately not going to be the last state court judge or federal judge or maybe Supreme Court justice who was arrested and charged by this Trump administration in the person of Hanna Dugan in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, circuit court judge, criminal court judge, who was picked up because all she was doing was enforcing the rule of law and the sanctity of rule of law in her own courthouse, in her own courtroom, and not allowing her courtroom to be the scene of a administrative arrest warrant execution to pick up somebody and try to have them deported. They could have done that outside, not in her courtroom. But now she's been charged with a criminal complaint, not yet a grand jury indictment, and has brought on some pretty heavy hitters to support her, including George Bush's former Solicitor General, Republican, right-wing, Paul Clement. And that's that story. I got a heavyweight with me here that you've met before on Legal AF, retired Judge Barbara Jaffe of the New York State Supreme Court. And she is a regular signer and maybe drafter, for all I know, of letters that are going to the Department of Justice, amicus briefs that are filed with courts. I'm sure as those cases I just identified make their way up from the circuit courts and the courts of appeal up to the United States Supreme Courts, judges like Judge Jaffe are going to be along for the ride. And I'm so pleased and honored to have her here. Barbara, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you, Michael. It's great to be back on Legal AF and the Midas Touch Network.
And thank you for you and Brian and all that were in the. We just got through Law Day. You know, it's been on the books since 1958. I'll be frank, 35 years of practice. I never thought about Law Day and the rule of law that it commemorates and celebrates the way I've done in the resistance movement against the Trump administration. And you were in the streets with thousands of other people in Foley Square, right at the scene of where, not of Donald Trump's crime, but of his conviction, right, in New York, with judges and former judges and lawyers and staff and other people, regardless of their profession or no profession or occupation, who just believe in the rule of law. And you sent back some great video. Your short's doing great. Brian's short's doing great. We put them all up on our short section. And then right after that, you and I, because we've done other hot takes together at the beginning of Legal AF, you told me about all this great stuff that you're doing with signing up. Talk about what's happening, why you joined, and then if you can, I don't know, share with us what's in the future in the pipeline for this group of 400 retired judges.
Well, at the outset, I don't know really what is in what's in the pipeline. I imagine I will be solicited to sign other amicus briefs, and I will happily do so if they're like these, very high quality. Quite frankly, my past, of course, as a judge, I could never do anything like this. I had to remain quiet, I had to remain silent, and I always felt very comfortable in that role. Did not want to opine too much about anything. But now that I retired in September 22, I feel a sense of freedom. Hallelujah, I'm free at last. I can speak my mind. And now it couldn't be a better time for me to speak my mind about the utter degradation of the rule of law by this current administration.
Yeah,
So,
and we appreciate it. I know you took your oath seriously about being nonpartisan and independent. I know that's a shock to the Trumpers and to Donald Trump that a judge took an oath and upheld an oath, but now freed from that oath, now you can be citizen Barbara Jaffe. And talk about, because we sometimes we use terms of art here, a little bit of shorthand. I try not to do that on Legal AF because I'm sensitive to our audience, and some went to law school, but most didn't. And so, why don't you do a little teachable moment here, a little TED talk? What is an amicus brief? Why do you think they're important? Do you think the courts rely on them or cite to them? Do you have any recent examples where an amicus brief seems to have swayed a judge's mind or weighed on their mind? And why do you want to have your name attached to such a brief, and what's its purpose? Kind of give an overview of that for the audience.
well, in general terms, I think the purpose is like going to a demonstration. You're showing support for an idea and for, well, in this case, for the rule of law. Whether it has an impact on the presiding judge, I think it must in some way. I mean, in the absence of an amicus brief, that would be a big a big absence when we're talking about the rule of law. So I think that it would be effective. And and by the way, having been a neutral before, I dismissed two cases against Donald Trump. So I think my neutrality is was on display then.
Yeah. So amicus briefs are just so people get caught
Well,
up.
it comes from the Latin,
Yeah,
amicus meaning friend. It's the friend of the court. And oftentimes in the brief itself, the signers of the brief are referred to as amici. Amici, that is Italian for friends. The plural of amicus is amici, amici, friends of the court. And we sign on because we are friends of the court, and that not necessarily do you have to be a judge to be a friend of the court, but anybody can sign on an amicus brief. There are lawyers who have signed on to these briefs as well as amici. There have been law firms that signed on also in other
yeah. I
separately.
think 500 law firms supported either Sussman Godfrey and or Perkins Coie with their briefing. Well, against great personal and professional sacrifice, because they literally have run in, as you have, into a burning building because we have an out of control lawless presidency that is vindictive and is looking for excuses. In fact, Beryl Howell, who we'll talk a little bit about on this hot take as well, in her really earth-shaking, not to us but to the Trump administration, new decision on permanent injunction in favor of Perkins Coie, she took to task and quoted the amicus and amicis in her footnote, which I think will go down in history as one of the greatest footnotes ever written. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, law firms like Perkins Coie and their law firm, Williams Connolly, because now lawyers need lawyers, should be lauded and applauded for doing the right thing and bringing their constitutional, non trivial constitutional issues to a federal judge to review, as opposed to bending the knee and trying to settle out with a lawless president, for which she has, right? That was a cowardice that she actually called out a number of times in her ruling. She actually used Paul Weiss and my old law firm Skadden Arps and Brian's old law firm Skadden Arps. She used them as an example for how Perkins had proved its case, because
Yeah.
she showed how the world divided to those that were like trying to pay their way out of this problem, because it was going to have a chilling effect, and those like Perkins Coie. And that was her point about the ethics. She said in her footnote, be careful, clients who continue to stay with those law firms that settled, because they've got a sword of Damocles over their head. And you have to wonder whether they're going to be your zealous advocate or not, or they're going to have one eye, right? They're going to be serving two masters. They're going to have one eye on the Trump administration. And you should worry about firms that have compromised their ethics and their professional responsibilities by this settlement. I thought that was a powerful message. And a lot of that came out of the Amici briefs, the amicus briefs that we talked about.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot at stake, but there's also a lot at stake for retired judges like me. Yes, I can't be kicked off the bench. I'm already off the bench. However, the level of retaliation taken by this administration on whatever, I feel genuinely threatened by it, but I don't care. I will
No,
do it
well,
anyway.
that's why you're here on Legal AF. I mean, Ketanji Brown Jackson, to a standing ovation in Puerto Rico at the First Circuit conference on Monday or Tuesday, she said, "I'm here to defend the judiciary against," and she didn't name it, but she said the elephant in the room because it's under attack and it should never be in a fair and free democracy. And people that wrote the amicus briefs to Judge Howell said in there, and I'm sure you're part of that, said in there, we should not have to worry about our livelihood, right, or
Safety.
having it be, or safety, right, and or have it be a career ender because we've decided to join in a brief to be submitted to the court, and that's how we feel right now, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a
And
lot of courage. Is there? What are you doing towards that's letter? That's brief writing, which is supremely important, especially when this thing gets up to the United States Supreme Court, and that's where this is all heading. I mean, it'll start with the D.C. Courts of Appeal. We're waiting on, just for those that are playing the protection of the Constitution home game. We've got the Jenner and Block case is being handled by Judge Bates. He just issued a preliminary injunction and scathing rebuke of the Trump administration just a few days ago. So he's about 2 or 3 weeks behind where Beryl Howell is. Perkins Coie, Judge Beryl Howell. Sussman Godfrey case, Judge Ali Khan. I believe she's the one that's also handling the transgender troops case. And she just came out with a scathing preliminary, temporary restraining order concerning Sussman Godfrey, and Wilmer Hale, Judge Leon. So there's going to be about 4 different cases that are all going to kind of coalesce together. First to the DC Court of Appeals, DC Circuit Appeals, and then up to the United States Supreme Court. And the question is, Barbara, what do you think is going to happen? Forget DC. I know they're going to win on appeal. What do you think is going to happen with this United States Supreme Court? This is a court where the chief judge stepped out of character and used his own political capital to do something extraordinary about a month or so ago, which is to issue a statement directly to the head of the executive branch, the president of the United States, to tell him to stop calling for the impeachment of judges. I mean, I've never seen that before in my life, maybe during an oral argument or during an opinion, but like to issue a press release. And they just gave a standing ovation, right, to Mr. Kneedler, who just retired on purpose to get away from the Trump administration after 160 oral arguments as the deputy solicitor general, and gave him a standing ovation for standing up for the rule of law, the living embodiment. What do you think this Supreme Court does?
I think they will affirm I think Beryl Howell's opinion will be affirmed. I even think that Judges Alito and Thomas will sign on to it. And that really is what the betting pool is on. What will they do? I think the rest of them will go along with this.
You think it's 7-2, but it could be 9-0.
Yes, that's my view.
And why do you think? Because we're so down, understandably, on Alito and Thomas. It just seems knee jerk, reflexively. Whatever Trump, it's like the old Marx Brothers. Whatever you say, I'm against it. They just constantly are. They almost never not side with the Trump administration. But why do you think this is a bridge too far, even beyond the pale for them?
They recently joined, and there was a 9-0 decision in, you would remember better than me.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So
yeah.
I think that's a bellwether.
To support Judge Zinnes concerning Abrego Garcia and their return.
So that is the basis for my opinion that they will go along with it. I can't see how they could write a decision, a dissent from that. They would have to say that the executive power supersedes the judiciary.
Well, how
That's
about this, Barbara? Think about that. Let's do a thought experiment. Suppose Trump issued tomorrow an executive order putting a federal judge or a state judge on a blacklist and directing all departments of his administration to never file a case and to instantly seek the disqualification and or transfer of a case assigned to Judge X because they don't like Judge X, and then fill in the blank for any judge in New York or California or Massachusetts or right, so, by name. I mean, it's the same thing as putting a law firm on a blacklist. What would the courts do then? What would the Supreme Court do then?
Well, it depends on the state. Certainly in New York State, it would never succeed. You can't just ask for that willy-nilly. You have a better shot at seeking a recusal on the basis of bias, but you'd have to prove it. And the judge is generally in New York State, that is, the arbiter of her own bias, whether
No,
she.
but do it this way, Barbara. He says, let's just fill in the blank. Let's just pull a judge out, Judge Boasberg, okay,
Mhm.
Judge Zinnis, the activist, leftist, Marxist Judge Zinnis. We'll do Judge Zinnis in Maryland. Obama appointee. By the way, these are his words, not mine. We love, I have Judge Zinnis action figures, in my bedroom. I'm very much a superhero. So, and I said in one of my hot takes, there's no more powerful judge than a federal judge. There's no more powerful federal judge than one who has been affirmed twice by the Fourth Circuit and once 9-0 by the United States Supreme Court in her case, right? So suppose Donald Trump, to get back at the Zinnises and the Boasbergs and the Beryl Howells of the world, issued an executive order directing Pam Bondi for the Department of Justice to ensure that no case, if it's ever filed, no case gets filed anywhere near those judges. And if those judges appear on the case, to immediately file a motion for disqualification. He issues the executive order. And somebody would have to challenge that. I'm not sure who it would be.
I don't think it would succeed.
Yeah.
It's just, you have a right to appeal. That's what they seem to lose sight of.
Yeah.
These are not, and everything in Perkins Coie case. I mean, the sanctions, it was simply because Perkins Coie was sanctioned once, and Judge Howell explained that it was a big nothing burger.
Oh my
And
God.
that was the basis for
They double filed something on an appeal. that was their sanction.
To his credit, Trump did appeal those cases, but he lost.
Yeah.
He lost. Now, if he, I guess he's at this go broke point in his administration where he's not going to appeal anymore. He'll simply issue executive orders.
Yeah.
And that is the slow creep or maybe fast run to authoritarianism and totalitarianism, which I think that the country will not countenance, not even the MAGAs.
Yeah, and the polling numbers are supporting your theory, because to be in the 39s and 40s in multiple polls, including with Fox News recently, that means he's lost MAGA. Because, if we're a 50-50 country or whatever it is, and you're polling at 39, you've lost 11 points somewhere else. And so that, in terms of the Republicans now are rejecting certain aspects of this administration and its attack on the rule of law. What do you think about, and are you guys thinking about as a group doing anything towards the Department of Justice? You've got an out of control Todd Blanche. These are all former criminal defense lawyers for Donald Trump or impeachment lawyers for Donald Trump. Let's remember.
I sat with him for many months. Todd
Right.
Blanche.
Okay, good. Hold on a point. We are not talking about a group of public servants who respect the fact that on the back of their jersey it says the United States of America. We have Pam Bondi, former impeachment lawyer for Donald Trump. I thought she was the worst of the 4 or 5 that he had in terms of performance. Todd Blanche, his lead criminal defense lawyer, solo practitioner, left his law firm in order to represent Donald Trump almost as a solo practitioner, brought along Emil Bove, who's the number 2. Then you've got, the number 4 in the Department of Justice is the Solicitor General, Donald Trump's criminal appellate lawyer, John Sauer. You've got Harmeet Dillon, who's a Republican political animal that has no interest in the Civil Rights Division and all interest in a sheer acquisition of power for herself. This is the group, people, that are your United States Department of Justice.
You know, when reading about the 2025 project months ago and reading a little bit about what Steve Bannon was doing, we had total warning that this would happen. This was all that I recall reading that Steve Bannon had been training hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of maggots to learn how to do these federal jobs. That was all in the pipeline.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the Democratic Party sat on their behinds. And I
Yeah,
don't
the party did, but the ACLU didn't, and the other attorneys general. People are wondering how the ACLU was able to run into court within the first 5 days. They got their injunction on birthright citizenship 5 days into the administration,
they
and
started writing it before. They started
exactly
writing it ages before.
to make people feel better in November, starting on the 6th or 7th of November. I started pulling the white papers off of the ACLU's website in the 8 or 9 important categories, from immigration to reproductive rights to the executive powers, the Alien Enemies Act, and started doing hot takes about it. I'm like, this is what's coming. ACLU is ready, and the attorneys general were ready. I mean, none of the people were like hoping for Kamala and the Democratic Party, but they also suspected that it wasn't going to go well, and they were ready, and they had everything in the can. So, Barbara, Judge Jaffe, let's talk about. We talked about amicus briefs being filed with courts, but there's other ways for former federal and state judges to express their opinion and join together and coalesce together in fellowship towards the Trump administration. And one of that ways is to address the Department of Justice. What's in the works related to that?
Well, Judge Luttig, retired Judge Luttig, Michael Luttig, of the
He was on the Sixth Circuit.
the fourth, no, the fourth.
Oh, he's on the Fourth?
I believe he was on the Fourth Circuit. And Judge Nancy Gertner, who is a district court judge, the District of Massachusetts, they drafted a letter to Attorney General Bondi about the arrest of Hanna Dugan, Judge Hanna Dugan. And what is really interesting about the letter, which I have signed on to, is that they don't address what happened in her courtroom on the day that federal agents came in to arrest a criminal defendant in front of her. They address the real salient point of the fact that Judge Dugan was not arrested by the feds until 7 days after the event giving rise to her arrest, which meant there was no urgency, no exigency. And if there was no exigency to arrest her, why was she arrested? Why was she handcuffed? Why was she perp walked? And the judges expressed their opinion that it was simply a spectacle and a way to intimidate other judges. And what other inference arises from the action of the federal government in doing this to Judge Dugan? And you can bet your bottom dollar, Michael, that when she's arraigned, maybe she has been, this case against her will be dismissed lickety split, I believe, even without knowing anything about the underlying aspects. I mean, the little I know about this kind of warrant, an administrative warrant, is that it's not supported by probable cause. A judge does not sign it.
Correct.
So it allows a great deal of discretion to the federal government to make these kinds of arrests.
And who can trust them right now? That was Hanna Dugan's point. She said, "Let me see your warrant."
Yeah.
Did you got a warrant from a judge? They said, "No, we have an administrative warrant." Administrative warrant is so low down the totem pole,
Right.
the food chain, that if the ICE agent knocked on your door with that type of warrant, you would not have to open your door, because it's not that type of warrant. She said, "Come back to me when you have a judge warrant," because who trusts the Trump administration when it comes to due process in the field of immigration? Nobody.
And she also she went up to her administrative judge. I mean, she was
Right.
careful about this. She went up to the administrative judge. So I think that it's not going to go anywhere against her. And it was just a stunt, and quite a mean spirited stunt at that. And they should be ashamed. And Pam Bondi, but she has no shame, Pam
No,
Bondi.
no, no, no.
I've
And
seen no.
they picked on Hannah Dugan because she's known as a liberal judge. She came out of Catholic services, she came out of legal aid. She believes in helping, as we all do, the downtrodden, the disenfranchised. She's a criminal judge. She sentences people. She had just sentenced the guy related to assault and battery. That's why he was in her criminal court. And all they had to do is set up outside. They knew him from his fingerprints and from the database that he was going to be in her courtroom.
That's right.
He came through a metal detector on the way in, so he's not armed on the way out, and just set up outside and arrest. You want to arrest him on the courthouse steps? Go arrest him on the courthouse steps or the convenience store next door. But don't do it in the courtroom, in the courthouse, in the hallway. Scare the crap out of everybody else and put everybody underground and scare them from the criminal justice system and the justice system in the state of Wisconsin.
But as you know, that's not addressed in the letter by Judges Luttig and Gertner. And I think that was very smart of them.
Mm-hmm.
Don't enter into that fray. And they also noted that the arrest and the way they arrested her was contrary to the DOJ's own directives. You can only do a perp walk and do the whole rigmarole, but if it serves a law enforcement function, or
Mm-hmm.
unless the photograph is already part of the record. But the law enforcement function here, I guess the administration would say, oh, well, she was disobeying the law. They'll make some
Yeah.
phony excuse, but it's not going to go far because the Milwaukee court system, the judges there, oh, you know what? They'll move to change venue, right?
Well, they may, but I'm wondering whether just to wrap up that part of the story, she's indicted for two felonies under the lowest form of indictment paper around, which is the criminal complaint. There has to be a federal grand jury and a presentation to the grand jury and have the grand jury determine. You can't just take this case to trial on a criminal complaint. So I'm wondering if they're going to find 20, the majority of 20 or 23, whatever it is, grand jurors in Milwaukee to indict her. Now that's without Paul Clement. He's not going to be there. She's not going to be there. This is going to be the prosecutor, a presiding judge occasionally, and the grand jury, and whatever evidence they put on. So we'll have to see. But this case has gotten so much publicity. It'd be hard. And Wisconsin has sort of rallied around one of their own for good reason. And, that's a kind of a liberal place, especially Milwaukee. Let's see if they even get an indictment, let alone a dismiss. But I think when Clement brings the dismissal to whatever federal judge has been assigned to, I think you're right. I think this gets effing dismissed.
Yeah.
Let's hope. But I'm glad you're here. Will you come on more regularly?
I'd love to.
All right, great.
I finished my class. I was teaching a
Yes.
course. It's finished. I'm
What was
doing
your course? What was your course?
drafting litigation.
Oh, that's good. We need that. Speaking of drafting litigation, so when this letter goes out, when it's out, we'll put it up on the. I'll get a copy of it. We'll put it up on the Legal AF Substack. Just many ways to support seeing great contributors like Judge Barbara Jaffe here. As everybody knows, since the time the judge was on with me originally, we're now up to, we're going to be hitting 700,000 subscribers in the next week or so. We just rolled it. We're well on our way to 1 million where we want to be. And I got about a dozen new contributors or total that have come on to Legal AF. We just added Sydney Blumenthal and Sean Wilentz. They're going to be our resident historians doing videos about putting everything about the Trump administration in some sort of historical context. And so Sydney Blumenthal and Sean Wilentz have just joined us. And then we've got Court Accountability Action, Lisa Graves and Alex Aronson and Mike Sachs, who talk about corruption in the federal court system all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And they have some amazing guests on there. We just had Jamie Raskin. We just had Sheldon Whitehouse. We got Melba Pearson, formerly of the ACLU. We got Dave Arenberg, former state attorney for Florida, and Dina Dahl, a legal commentary. Shan Wu, who used to be the general counsel for Janet Reno in the Attorney General's office. Amazing group, all with different voices and perspectives here on Legal AF. Take a minute, hit that subscribe button. That really helps. And come over to our Legal AF Substack as well. Judge Barbara, always a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you. Keep up the great work, Michael. We're
Thank you
very
very
proud
much.
of you.
Yes, and I'm proud that you guys are our friends. And we'll see you on the next Legal AF Hot Take. I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.